Hello, this is R Rats with Team 4545 League analyzing the game between Kid Cobra and Dracoic. This game was played in team event number 53 in the fourth round. Let's have a look. Okay, the advanced variation, and it shouldn't pose black any problem whatsoever. There's one player, a friend of mine in here in Team 45 League, that is goes by the handle of N Fork, and he has played a lot of games with black in this position, and he usually does quite well. So if you're looking for a player to locally to see how he handles this, look in his league history and his ICC history. Okay, so the standard move here is Bishop F5. I think N Fork also plays C5 in this position. And it loses a tempo if you're going to go into French defense, but you don't have to go into French defense. But anyway, Bishop F5 is normal. And here, after four moves, we have reached the critical point of this game because black just falls apart in a hurry. I'm kind of familiar with some of this from back in the 70s. I know the basic strategy. Black is okay. Black needs to take here, and at some point, black does this funny little maneuver, Queen B6 and Queen A6, and the idea is to exchange the Queen on A6, and then this knight gets over to A6, and it becomes a fine piece for black, surprisingly. And we have a little lag because I've pointed twice an arrow to go from B6 to A6, and it hasn't shown up. But if you look at the position just for a moment, white has a couple pawns on dark squares, and he's got a dark squared bishop, so those reduce his mobility. And black has pawns on the light squares for the most part, and that'll help his bishop's activity. Okay, I'm just going to point an arrow this way. Well, it worked that way. I don't know why it didn't work over there. Oh well, I did it twice. I guess I don't have lag. Anyway, black shouldn't have anything to fear from this system. There's a lot of good ways to play this. E6 is fine. E6 is fine. Probably the logical move here, and just carry on. And both sides will develop their pieces, and black will do what I said. Let's just play it out a little bit. Okay, let's just go for it now. Okay. And I'm not sure if it comes this quick. And then if white takes, this knight becomes a fine piece. It's supporting the C5 thrust, and it'll get to B4, and eventually it could do a lot of things. I have a game from back in the 70s, maybe I can share someday, where this was employed against me, and I just ran into all kinds of trouble with it. But anyway, what happens is black just commits positional suicide. I guess he had his own idea here, and he comes up with this move, which really doesn't make sense to me. It just loses a tempo, and his idea is he wants white to take and get the open rook file, but white comes up with this very interesting move that just messes black all to shreds, and here it is, E6. And once again, like I say, I can't emphasize enough the time control. You have 45 minutes to start and 45-second increment. So even if you have to take 45 minutes on one move, you're still able to play with a 45-second increment every time, and you can still play a reasonable game. Black's clock is going to go up by 10 seconds, meaning he spent 35 seconds on this move. 35 seconds. And you can't, in a critical position like this, clearly evaluate everything. In essence, there's not that many candidate moves black can play here. But, okay, what he does, I think, is absolutely horrible, and I'm sorry to say that, but there it is. Okay, what does this do? Why is this bad? Okay, for the pawn sacrificed, someone tell me when this black bishop is going to get in the game. Okay, black is going to have to move both of his pawns on g6 and e6, and then move both of his pawns on e7 and g7 just to offer it 2 diagonals. So it's a long way from that's a long way from happening. Black's going to have to sacrifice a pawn right away to get that piece into play. So let's look at the alternatives. Okay, it's first off, it's white's move. It's not even black's move, but e5 is going to drop the pawn, then you can play e6, okay? But as I said, it is black's, not black's move. Okay. The next thing is both those pawns are weak, so one of them is going to fall eventually, and chances are both of them are going to fall, and that might be the way that black finally gets his piece developed. Okay, so let's just go back for a moment and consider what else could black have done here, and how could he make this evaluation in 35 seconds? He couldn't, because he didn't look at the position. He didn't see what could possibly be going on. Okay, one alternative is just tuck tail and run. Admit you've made a mistake, that your plan was wrong, and we're going to give up castling. Okay? Now, I'm not saying this is any good, but let's just take a quick look here, okay? Now, the idea here is the king is going to try to stay sheltered there as long as he can, and if he has to, he'll go to g8. So what's white going to do? Well, he's probably going to develop his knight. Okay, now you play e6, and if white wants, he's got a check. Okay, fine. Now we tuck tail and run, and then white takes this pawn. Now white's a pawn ahead, but at least black's got some chances to get his pieces out. So what's he going to do next? Okay, let's just park the rook on h7. Okay, now white's a clear pawn ahead. He can go threaten another one. It's probably not good to take the bishop on f8, just because that knight will have just been a little workhorse moving all around the board in order to grab the bishop. But the knight's well posted on f4. It's attacking a pawn, and it's not clear how black's going to defend this pawn. Okay, if queen d7, he takes away a square from his knight. So let's try queen e8. Okay, then white can play queen e2, and white's getting ready to win a second pawn. And black's struggling here, but he might be okay. Now he has to come back and play king f7. Now the attack has kind of run its course, so white may want to castle queenside here. So let's just get the knight into play. Let's put him on d2 so we can get to f3 and e5, right? Or g5, and then the knight comes here, and then here. Now we're threatening a check down on this square, so black's just hurting for certain. But anyway, this is just a sample line that probably would take about a minute just to evaluate and see if it's something you want to accept or reject. So let's go back and let's look at the other candidate moves. They are f6 and f5, and I think probably f5 is the better of the two. The reason it's the better of the two is it keeps the white queen out of g4, and if the pawn was on f6, the queen could not only go to g4, it could go to d3 and be attacking g6. And this black bishop is still a problem, but it became a problem when we allowed e6. But what we're going to try to do is get some counterplay on that pawn on e6 and try to win it. Now, I'm not saying we can, but it's going to be a pain in the black side for a long time. Okay, it's white to move. Probably what he should do here is play bishop f4. And the reason that he should play bishop f4 is so that it stops black from playing queen d6. Because a lot of times in similar positions, like I've seen this come up, this pawn get wedged into e6 against the Nimzovich defense, and black will play queen d6, but he has a knight on c6 in that position, and it can go back to d8. Well, we can't do that in this position. But here, black has a semblance of sanity, and he has chances to hold on. He can do a few things, and it all starts with development. Okay, knight to f6. Now we want to kick that bishop out of there. And I'm not saying we can do it, but we're going to try. Now white should go about his business and develop. Now let's go ahead and put the knight there. Now let's drop the bishop into e5. Now that's a terrific square. But at some point, black is going to get some counterplay. He can play c5 here. The point being, if pawn takes, we can check and regain the pawn on c5. Now we've cleared c6 for a knight, which is something I said we need to do if we want to try to counterattack this pawn. At the same time, aside from playing c5, black could also try queen c8. So black is getting some resources to try to go and corral that pawn and not have his kingside invaded. So even though bishop f4 is a good move, it's something black can deal with. What are white's other candidate moves? Well, other developing moves are just fine. We could play the knight to f3 with the idea that we're going to put the knight on g5 and anchor that pawn in. Okay, now that gives black some problems, because knight g5 to f7 is a fork. So we don't want to drop any material here if we can avoid it. Okay, so maybe what black needs to do now is just run the queen out of there. Okay, the purpose is to try to get castled, and then but maybe that's not going to happen. Let's just try a one-piece attack. Knight a6 and knight to f7. Now black can probably chase that knight out of there if he does this carefully. Rook h7. Now, so this attack is a little premature. For all the crazy things in the black position, he does have, at least he has some pieces developed, and white doesn't really. White may not want to castle kingside simply because of the open file, but that's okay. We can just bring another piece into play. Let's put the knight on d2. Well, we don't want to do that. d4 hangs. Let's put it on c3. Okay, now black has this resource, knight h6, to try to get rid of that knight. Okay, black has another, and white could trade it, and black repairs his pawn structure, and then castles queenside. He could be okay. Or black could try c5 in this position instead. c5 puts some direct pressure on d4 and on e6. So it might be that white just running his knight up there is a little too premature. But even on queen b6, like I say, now we can go ahead and castle. h2 is well covered, and black's not piling up on it. We can go ahead and castle. Now maybe c5. Okay, now you're on e6. Okay, rook e1. And then suddenly black gets knight f6 in. Now his objective is to go to e4 and shut off that e-file and get a nicely placed knight. So black has plenty of resources here. He just has to stop and think what they will be. And let's just go back briefly and look at f6 as an alternative. See, the thing about f6 is it keeps white out of a couple squares he wants to use, but the drawback is it just invites white into g6. So after queen d3, certainly can't push g5 because queen g6 is mate, so you might have to stop and play f5 anyway. But as the other variations showed, white didn't really have much going against f5 directly by playing the knight into f3, then either g5 or e5, and he didn't seem to have much with bishop f4 and bishop e5. Black had some resources that could finally get him some development. Now, none of those solved the problem of that bishop on f8. That'll just have to come later, but at least black is surviving. So let's just go back and see what happened. Okay, suddenly, basically white's winning. It doesn't matter what black does here, but at least he's trying to get developed. And then comes this check and knight g5, and now the threat is to check on e6, which wins the bishop because black can't come up to c7 and to win the rook. So black is just losing material here, and that's what happens, and basically game over. And look at black's clock again. It's just not budging. He's using the increment, And really, the rest of the game really deserves no comment. I'll just click through it, and White's up ahead a whole rook, and Black really has no play and should just resign. But he doesn't. But I'll show the whole game. Probably played on because he was disgusted. At least he didn't play slowly. He's gaining time on the clock. Both sides are gaining time on the clock pretty much. It's an easy routine win. But it just shows sometimes things that can go wrong in an opening if you don't take your time. And, I can't stress it enough. I was hoping that by introducing these videos that people would watch them and people get a clue why to take their time, but unfortunately most of the players the vast majority of the players in the league aren't watching these videos, and they're not seeing my notes that you need to take your time, and as a result they're blitzing their chess and they're paying the price because they're losing games and they're losing them quick. So basically this game really deserves no comment. I don't know why I'm going on, but I'm just doing it. Now here goes a pawn. Now White says, let's trade a bishop or I'll win your pawn. Blockading the pawn. Well, he didn't go to d3. He sees a way to trade more pieces. That's fine. Just trade pieces, and Black has no hope. Now, instead of winning the pawn, he'll trade that bishop. Now the rook's activated. And that almost wins his pass pawn, but we'll work on it. We'll get it. It's not going anywhere. See, there it goes. So, essentially game over, but it's still going. Too bad White couldn't have had a mating attack out of all this, and the game wouldn't have gone on 54 moves. I guess if there's any consolation for Black, he managed to make it to. He might make it to move 60. Let's see if he does. Oh, he's not going to make it. It's mate next. And there it is. Okay, I thank everyone for their time. Lesson, take your time. Think, especially in critical positions. E6 was extremely critical. And if you have an opening novelty you want to try to look it up in the book first. I don't think you'll find Bishop G6 in the book. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. All right, thanks again. Take care.